The running back market has completely flipped its head going into the 2024 season. We're going to go through Zach's rankings. We're going to have conversation. We're going back and forth. So let's not waste any more time. Zach, take us to your tiers.
Everything's changed. Literally. I know, like, oftentimes we put, like, a thumbnail out. Everything changed. No, like, everything has changed. So we feel very good about certain people. Let's start with the RB1 Battle. Okay, these are the guys that, in my rankings, they are battling for the RB1 position. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall. I don't know if you saw Bijan. I think it was an interview or it was a tweet, and he was basically talking to fantasy owners, and he was like, I feel the same way, guys. Like, I didn't get it either. I didn't understand why I was used that way. Like, don't worry, things are going to change.
Oh, boy.
But even throughout a Arthur Smith-filled year, he was the RB9, scoring 14.5 PPR points per game. Keep in mind that that number is a little bit skewed because Arthur decided to play him one snap when he had a headache versus Tampa Bay. Jahmyr Gibbs actually averaged more points per game than him last year at 16.1. He finished as the RB10. And then Breece Hall finished as the RB2. However, my concern is just, and this is going to sound a little bit silly. Some people might not agree with me, but he had 95 targets last year. Why do we think he had 95 targets? Well, number one, he's a great pass catcher. That makes a ton of sense. But number two, the offense was dog shit. Excuse my language. I'm sorry. We're trying to get better on the language.
Yeah.
But like, I don't expect this offense to be primarily dump offs to Breece Hall and throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson, 12 times a game inaccurately. I think an Aaron Rodgers-led offense is going to be a little bit more efficient, and Breece Hall's going to be fine. He's going to score more touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he's going to get 95 targets again. Maybe that number comes down to like 70 or something. That's still a huge amount of targets. I'm saying I think in PPR formats, the points just come from a different source, but he is still battling for that RB1 spot. So all those guys are in the same tier for me.
Yeah, look, that makes sense. I like all these guys, all youthful guys as well, guys that we kind of expected to be in this RB1 battle. I would agree. I think that he will have less targets in the air, maybe more touchdowns, a total of 9 touchdowns on the ground and in the air combined. So maybe we see that number bumped up just a little bit coming into this year with Aaron Rodgers finally leading the helm and playing more than 4 snaps. My goodness.
Yeah.
I can't believe that was actually real.
We want to add draft pick values here as well. I'm just going to say the 101 to the 105 it's in this range. Like I personally, in a super flex league, that's the perspective that we're coming from. Right. I don't think that you would, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think everyone would prefer like the 101 over one of these running backs. That's Caleb Williams. I think everyone would prefer the 102 over one of these running backs. That's Marvin Harrison Jr. You can make a decision from the 103 to the 105, but I believe there will be 3 quarterbacks drafted in the top 5 this year, and I know the hit rate isn't always there, but I think a lot of people in Superflex formats are going to prefer a Jaden Daniels, who was the 2nd overall pick, a Drake May, who was the 3rd overall pick in Superflex leagues, over a running back, which we love running backs. It's just Superflex leagues, quarterbacks are typically valued higher. And then obviously I'm a big Malik Neighbors guy, so if Malik Neighbors goes top 5, what if he goes to the Cardinals at 4? Are you guys going to bet on Neighbors or Breece Hall? Like, you have to make that decision, but I would put the 101 to the 105 right in this range, personally.
Okay. Yeah, look, that makes sense, especially in the Superflex format. I would even say in the 1 quarterback league for the 1 quarterback people out there, maybe that's the 101 to the 103, maybe the 104, depending on your situation. Maybe it's a tight end premium. Maybe you can then have a conversation about Brock Bowers and how big the premium is there. But yes, I would agree. The 101.
I think in 1 quarterback, I would definitely say the 101, and then it's a conversation around the 102 for me.
Okay. However way you guys want to do in the 1 quarterback league, I think it's up to your discretion here. But I can see CMC is the next guy up here. So
a couple of names in this tier. No, I'm just kidding. This is CMC. Might be deserving of the RB1 battle. This is your Travis Kelce of the running back spot. If you're competing, there's probably not another running back you'd prefer. You ride it till the wheels fall off. But because of his age, because he has been in the league for so long, and we know the life cycle of a running back, it's hard to really put him in that conversation with Bijan and Gibbs and Breece. I know he has broken down many times, but we're not anticipating he will, but we're also being realistic with his age. And I would also put like the 106 in the Superflex league kind of valued in the same range. I think you got to like make a decision. Do I want to build around Rome Odunze, or the likes of a Christian McCaffrey. I think it depends on what type of team you are.
Yeah, and the CMC makes sense. I think in the redraft perspective, I think at the moment for me, he's definitely my RB1 in the redraft perspective. But in the Dynasty, I completely understand if you want to go for youth, going for these younger guys, still getting those pass catching opportunities in the air. Completely agree with CMC. Let's not waste any more time. Top 5 battles.
Yeah, so these are all guys you can see. We have 4 running backs off the board so far. So I would say these following 4 players are all battling to be number 5. Any one of them could be number 5, and I would value them all quite similarly. I think some have a little more confidence now with contracts. Jonathan Taylor is in that conversation. I know people hate him, but Travis Etienne, I'll stick by my guy. I will put the value of like the 107 pick around this range too. I'm not going to say it's exactly a science here, but this is kind of where I would value the 107 in Superflex. Then Saquon, who gets the contract, and Josh Jacobs. These guys are both battling for RB5. In my humble opinion, Saquon Barkley signs a 3-year deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. We've talked about this. 3 years, $37 million. He gets to play behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And there is this narrative, well, he's going to lose touchdowns to Jalen Hurts because that's what happened with DeAndre Swift. It's just like trying to say like 1 + A = square. You know, that just doesn't make any sense at all. Those are completely different players. DeAndre Swift has never been reliable on the goal line. You sign Saquon so you can slightly alter your offense because now you have Saquon Barkley. So I think that narrative is a little bit silly, keeping in mind that Miles Sanders had 11 rushing touchdowns in 2022. Josh Jacobs, right in this conversation for me. I'll hold my hands up. I have made videos where I did not feel good about Josh Jacobs. Clearly, I was wrong. He signs a 4-year deal to go to the Green Bay Packers. That is some serious security. For a player that I have question marks around, I don't know that he's the same player that he was that year he led the league in rushing. But that contract tells me that the Packers, who have a huge history of successful running backs in fantasy, believe he is. They believe there were outside factors contributing to him performing the way he did last year.
You know, actually, I just released a video about Josh Jacobs and what that entails. If you look at the contract details, they do have a potential out in 2025. Just wanted to bring that to light, because if he doesn't perform in 2024, maybe he gets injured, or they said, you know what, we just like this 2025 running back class a little bit better, and we'd rather just take the dead cap hit. That's something to look out for if Josh Jacobs is not performing up to par in 2024, even if in a healthy or if he is injured. But something to keep in mind here when they are battling here for the top 5. Love JT, love Travis Etienne, love Saquon Barkley. I think all these guys make sense here. At the moment, I do have Saquon as my top 5 in the top 5. I think
So you would put him over JT?
I would put him over JT at this moment because I feel more confident in how that offense is structured, especially at the goal line area. And I know, a lot of the conversations I think a lot of people have been talking about so far in Twitter's first about Saquon Barkley is what about the tush push? They never had a competent running back, a big running back like this Saquon Barkley coming in. Now they don't have to do the tush push. I think a lot of the injuries, I wouldn't say a lot of the injuries. I think maybe there have been maybe 1 or 2 nicks and bruises there on Jalen Hurts when it came down to the tush push at times. Because so many teams were trying to stop it. So yes, I do have Saquon Barkley over JT. Maybe that's dumb based off of the age.
I have them all in the same tier, so I'm not going to sit here and say it's dumb if I have them in the same tier.
So
I mean, look, I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think you and I have really changed the way we view running backs in Dynasty. In the last, I think 2 years ago, it really clicked for us. Like, okay, running backs are super volatile. Why don't we think about them in like the span of like a 1 to 2 year window? Because anything outside of that, we have no idea what the position will look like anyway. We have no idea what rookies come in and steal jobs. We have no idea what young guys get injured. So I don't think that's crazy if you're viewing it from a 1 to 2 year perspective at all.
Yeah, completely agree. I am surprised you don't have 2 players, I would say, battling here for the top 5. So take us to the feel good tier.
Feels great. Okay.
Feels great.
Big distinguish words.
What's
is the word I'm looking for? It's anyway. Okay. The joke is gone. It's past. Look, I wanted to put them in that top 5 battle. I just feel better about those guys. Again, thinking about Dynasty in the span of 1 to 2 years. All these guys we know are workhorses, and we've had multiple years of them being workhorses. So I feel really good about them. Y'all know I love me some Devon Achane. I just can't yet put him in that conversation. He is maybe well worthy of being in that conversation. In fact, if I was in a situation where I was a rebuilding team, would I rather have Achane over a Jacobs or a Saquon? Probably, right? Like, probably I'd rather stay young and, kind of build my team out that way. That makes a lot of sense. Kyren Williams, who I am not anti-Kyren Williams. In fact, I feel like I've been one of the people on YouTube who has been like, why can't he do it again? Like, why can't he in this offense do it again? But at the same time, we have seen the history of Sean McVay with running backs, and Kyren costs nothing. So there's not, if he gets injured and they need to bring someone else, there's not really much holding him to that role. And then Kenneth Walker, who at the end of the day, we have to recognize that Zach Charbonnet is there.
Exactly.
And who knows what happens? Like, who knows what this team looks like with Zach Charbonnet in year 2. And I know it's silly, but it's like, would you rather have Ken Walker or Saquon, who just signed a 3-year deal in Philly, as the dude?
That's
Travis
older.
Etienne, who's the dude.
Exactly.
JT, who's the dude. Jacobs, who's the dude. It's just, I don't think we saw Charbonnet fully make sense in that offense. And I can't say for sure that the offense is going to look the exact same, because there's an entire coaching change and staff change that's just happened this offseason.
Yeah.
And I think this is where I would put the range of the 108 and the 109 draft picks as well. Right in that range, your Brian Thomas Jr.'s, maybe if a Dunze or a Bowers falls, depending on your premium, your Mitchells, your Worthies, Franklins, McConkeys, whoever you're looking at there.
Yeah, and just to expand on Kenneth Walker there, I am very skeptical. I did bring him in a pivot video or a sell now before it's too late, because, like Zach said, Zach Charbonnet is there, new head coaching regime. Can I tear down to James Cook, David Montgomery, somebody that maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable in their role, even though it's tearing down, and get a little bit more value? I'm not in a feel great mood when it comes down to Kenneth Walker, because I actually don't know what 2024 is going to look like for him when it comes down to Zach Charbonnet and his new head coaching regime. But we could definitely be wrong.
Yeah.
We've seen him definitely falling based off of the contracts that we've seen for some of these guys in the community. But I think there's going to be a lot of, what's the word? Skepticism? English is hard to...
Skepticalness.
Yeah,
that's not the word at all.
Whatever you
skepticism. Skepticism.
That word with Kenneth Walker going into the 2024 season, I think it's going to be very difficult to gauge. At the moment, he feels like one of the hardest running backs to gauge based off value because of how questionable 2024 feels like, I think, for the fantasy community right now. And if I can trade him away for a random first in 2025, maybe the 108, can I squeeze the 107 out of that owner? That is something that I'm willing to do here going into, going into this fantasy season.
I would agree. I would pivot off of Walker for any of the running backs there. And I do think the reason I have him here is because I do believe he's a better back. Like, I feel confident in saying he's the better back, but not to the point where, like, he's going to get Josh Jacobs usage or Saquon usage or any of those top 5 battle guys. Yeah,
I agree. All right, feels good. Take us to that one.
It feels good. There's only 2 running backs in there, but this is where I would place the 110, the 111, and the 112. And obviously the running backs I'd add in there is James Cook. And I want to add another name, but I don't actually know now that I'm sitting here, it actually feels good. So I think I'm going to reluctantly change in the middle of a video, because I'm looking at this tier. It's called Feel Good. There's a name we'll talk about in the next tier that I'm just thinking, I don't know how good I actually feel about him, but James Cook to me feels like a safe buy. Second round draft capital. We saw when the offensive coordinator changed in Buffalo last year, his usage skyrocketed.
Yes.
And the team started winning a bunch of games. He is clearly a better player than I originally assumed. Now, I can't put him in feels great, because I wouldn't be surprised if they add someone to complement him. I mean, that's just the nature of this league.
Sure.
But I would say at this point, the 110, the 111, the 112, you're probably preferring over a James Cook. I mean, is that a Bowers? Is that a McConkey? a Franklin, and Adonai Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy. Is Benson and Brooks in that conversation? Did Trey Benson go to the Giants in round 2? Like, are you taking him over James Cook? You know, those are the type of conversations that you start to have here in this tier.
Yeah, and look, that all makes sense. I think it's all depends on who's going to be at that wide receiver or that 110 to the 112. Because if the wide receiver life is there and they have that first round or early second round draft capital, I think we will all agree that we will want those players over James Cook personally in the rookie drafts here. But yes, I like James Cook. I do believe they're probably are going to bring somebody in to complement, but it's not going to be anyone that I'm necessarily scared about. Maybe it's a Braylon Allen as a bigger back. Maybe it's a Aldrick Estime. You know, it's just going to be a bigger size. I think if they bring in another pass catching back like a James Cook, that's a little bit more worrisome just based off of those opportunities that can be taken away from him in 2024, if that is the case. But if not, I'm still believing on that bigger back that they were hoping for. They tried to get Lenny, right? You had all these other guys there that really didn't show up. So I think size is what they need over there in Buffalo there. All right, serious upgrades. Go for it.
Upside, but
upside.
I love that word.
It's really small. Sorry, it's really small.
Really?
So, yeah.
Well, just before we get into the next tier, we got to let you guys know that we have released our version 3 of our 2024 rookie report. If you want access to this entire rookie class, you want to deep dive into their profiles, use the promo code LAND, become a Mother Flocker member, and you'll unlock that, as well as a live Dynasty team review where we break down your team, as well as updated rankings after all this chaos in free agency. And not only do you get the updated rankings, you can use my rankings, Badaki's rankings, in the trade calculator to see exactly what we think. So become a Mother Flocker member with the code LAND, support the show, and get some awesome perks in return. Serious upside tier. There was a player that mid-video, I'm, sporadic, I guess. Sporadic. Jeez, Louise, words.
Words are hard today.
I just couldn't say I actually felt good about the player. I do think he has serious upside still, and it's a bit silly. Rachaad White was the name that I left out. You look at last year, we're talking about Rachaad White, who had an incredible year, was the RB4 in fantasy football. Mm-hmm. Why the hell can't I put him higher than this? He averaged almost 16 points per game. It just feels like they're inevitably going to add someone to seriously complement him. He was really inefficient as a runner, averaged 3.6 yards per carry. I personally believe that had more to do with the offensive line rather than an inefficiency of Rachaad White himself. I think if you put Rachaad White in Philadelphia last year, he's probably a pretty damn efficient running back, right?
Right.
So I don't want to discount him, but I can't exactly put my finger on it. I just don't feel as good about him and his safety than I do a James Cook. Okay. Mm-hmm. Things are going to get weird in this tier. You ready for this?
I'm listening.
Isaiah Pacheco next.
That's
and this, again, guys, we are looking at Dynasty in the span of 1 to 2 years at this point for running backs. Why would Derrick Henry not be here? I know I looked on Keep Trade Cut. He's the RB24 right now. Why would he not be in the top 15 conversation? Genuine question. He gets a 2-year deal from the Baltimore Ravens. We saw Gus Edwards be a must start multiple weeks last year because he was the starting running back for the Baltimore Ravens. They brought in Derrick Henry on a pretty impressive contract. I think it was $10 million per. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. And if I'm thinking in the span of 1 to 2 years and I'm competing, why the hell would I not want Derrick Henry? Like, genuinely. I thought to myself, David Montgomery's in this tier. Why would I not want Derrick Henry over David Montgomery? If I'm thinking in the span of 1 to 2 years, do I know Montgomery is going to have the same role in 2 years? I don't know that. I mean, what happens if he slows down? How about Javonte Williams? I'll put him in this tier. DeAndre Swift. Those are the next two guys here. And then I think this is kind of the range of like the 201 to the 206. The 201 might be more valuable than some of these names. Some of these names it might not. Like the 206 might not be as valuable as a Rachaad White. So it's somewhere in between there.
Okay.
This tier is crazy. It's weird. There's serious upside across the board. But again, we cannot predict what the running back room looks like next year. So why not Derrick Henry here?
No, and I think, I was a really big advocate for Derrick Henry last year coming into the season. Obviously, that didn't pan out. He still finished as a top 10 running back. He was RB8 this past year. He goes into a better offensive line. By the way, the Tennessee Titans, I think, were top 3 or top 2 in giving up the most sacks and hit behind the line of scrimmage when it came down to the quarterback or the running back position.
Sheesh.
So take that as you will when it comes out to Derrick Henry. I know we were a little bit in a disagreement coming into last year saying that his inefficiency wasn't there. I think it was because he wasn't getting utilized the same at all, in my personal opinion. Now he goes to the Baltimore Ravens, who clearly have a better offensive line, who also have a mobile quarterback that they have to deal with, and a little zigzag gadget over there in Zay Flowers. Yeah. Derrick Henry goes into a significantly better offense for the 2 years. Maybe he's on the older side, but yes, a 2-year span. I'm taking Derrick Henry. Maybe, I don't know about over David Montgomery, but I'm right there with you. I think they are in the same tier for me here. And just to expand on Rachaad White as well, we've seen the reports of Todd Bowles coming out saying that we want to take the workload and the workload that Rachaad White got last year, line it up a little bit. We want to bring somebody to complement him. What if that is another big running back? What if that is another running back that can catch the ball in the backfield? That can be a huge, huge indicator that Rachaad White's maybe targets in the air could be cut in half. 70 targets this past year. What if that's a Bucky Irving? What if that's a Ray Davis? What if that is a Jalen Wright? Whatever that looks like coming into this draft, he is and I doubt they're going to be signing anyone in free agency because they haven't signed anyone else. Right?
I almost look at Rachaad White the 180-degree version of that. A Blake Corum comes in.
Okay,
a Braylon Allen, an Andre Estime, a Ray Davis. I know he's a good pass catcher, but I wouldn't. I think he's a bruiser too.
Yeah,
that's my concern more. I think his pass catching role will remain, but I just don't know if he's like that true 3-down workhorse.
Yeah, and look, and maybe that could be the case there with Rachaad White, but I completely agree. I love DeAndre Swift. I didn't think you would have DeAndre Swift in the serious
trying
upside.
to digest everything.
Okay, I'm a big advocate for DeAndre Swift. I think he's a good buy low. I don't think a lot of the fantasy community really want DeAndre Swift with Roscoe and Khalil Herbert there. I think there's going to be upside. And yes, maybe we are looking at it in a 1 to 2 year span. Let's look at it from the 2-year span with DeAndre Swift. One of the biggest things that we talked about is Khalil Herbert no longer being on this team next year. And they have Rashawn Johnson, who was a 3rd, 4th round pick this past year's draft.
I think Khalil is still on the team though.
Yes, I know. I'm just talking about in a 2-year perspective. That's what I said. Okay, in a 2-year perspective, DeAndre Swift could be taking the next step with that contract, with Caleb Williams potentially under center, with DJ Moore being there. And I think it may not be the projection that we want this year in 2024, but if we're playing on the longer year span, maybe you're somebody that plays in a 4-year span, DeAndre Swift feels like an exciting upside player coming into, I guess, 2025, or maybe a good value being in 2024. So I would agree here.
There's clearly upside. I think, can I tell you the mind shift change for me? Mm-hmm. It was like, look, I could be wrong. There's a lot of projection in Dynasty, and people always have a problem with that. So your opinion is a projection. Welcome. It's Dynasty football here, right? Trying to make projections off of, as much information as we have. But I believe Caleb Williams is going to be a Bear. I just believe it. I think he's going to Chicago. I don't see them passing up on him. And I loved the comp Daniel Jeremiah had for Marshawn Lloyd, which was DeAndre Swift. And I'm trying to think about what that offense looks like with a Caleb Williams instead of a Justin Fields. I feel much better about DeAndre Swift if Caleb Williams is your quarterback rather than if Justin Fields is your quarterback. And that's not a slight on Justin Fields. It's just I feel like that offense will be a little more efficient. There'll be a little bit more usage of your running back in the passing game. And I am not sold that Swift is a goal line guy for them. Like, I think Rashawn Johnson's going to take a ton of touchdowns.
I would agree.
And it's going to piss a lot of people off. I still think Rashawn Johnson's a big part of their plans. But clearly, they thought Swift could do something Johnson can't. So I can't discredit them for making this signing and giving him guaranteed money.
Yeah, and I completely agree. One of the things we loved about DeAndre Swift was his pass catching ability. He was a PPR monster in Detroit. And obviously, he went to the best offensive line, one of the best offensive line, the Philadelphia Eagles. May not be the same opportunity, but I think he's still going to have good opportunity, I guess, in the air as well. When you think about the Chicago Bears going into the 2024 season here, hard to project. Looks like it's next. Take us through it.
These 4 names, I can't put my finger on it. I can't do it. It's Kendre Miller, who I love. I'm obsessed with. Alvin Kamara, who's still in town, probably scores more points next year than Kendre. And then Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard. I mean, how do I project that backfield? It's super duper confusing. I mean, if you are going to play the mindset of, well, Tony Pollard was paid, therefore Tony Pollard equals starter. Let me ask you, how did that work last year for Miles Sanders in Carolina? Clearly, Miles Sanders didn't perform well in Carolina, but also Carolina's offensive line was not very good. I think that this offense is completely changing. I don't want to get too far into the Calvin Ridley signing, but I personally loved it because to me, everything they've done in this offseason has told me the offense is completely different. You have to completely stop thinking about what the Titans were for the past 5 years because it doesn't matter anymore. There's a new staff. There's a new head coach. Everything's completely changed. The signing of Pollard, the signing of Calvin Ridley tells me the type of offense they want to be in. But still, if I were to tell you today, who do I think is the better player in the NFL? Who's the more efficient back, more explosiveness? I would say that's Tajay Spears. So that's why I have Tajay one spot higher, but not to the point where they're in different tiers because I have no idea what their plans are for these two guys, right?
Yeah.
What I will say is Tony is often, I said this last year when I talked about him as like the Dallas Cowboys guy. He's not a small dude. I mean, he's 215. He's not some small guy, so I think he could be their like first and second down guy.
Yeah, that's what I think.
But he also didn't like really dominate in that role last year, but he also wasn't healthy. Again, like how do we project this? And with Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller, it's just like I think Kendre should have a role. I think Kendre should get at least 50% of the work. That doesn't mean that the Saints agree because Alvin Kamara was truly awful on the ground last year. He was one of the worst running backs efficiency-wise as a rusher last year. Through the air, we know he's still very good. But if they don't look at that, I mean, maybe the Saints are dumber than we think they are. But if they don't look at those efficiency numbers, I just don't know what they're doing as a program. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do here. I don't.
I get you, and like Tony Pollard is really somebody that's hard to gauge. And the best way I have been thinking about it is, what has this head coach and offensive coordinator do at the Cincinnati Bengals? Because that's who the new head coach is, if I'm not mistaken, for the Tennessee Titans. I forgot his name off the top of my head, but
Callahan.
Yes. You think of what happened with Joe Mixon. You think of Joe Mixon and Chase Brown. Just for specifically last year, Joe Mixon was always getting goal line opportunities. He always takes off in the second half of the season. Tony Pollard, I think Joe Mixon is a better running back than Tony Pollard so far. Maybe the community doesn't see that, but I think he's going to play the Joe Mixon role, Tony Pollard.
Yeah.
If that offense is going to be firing at all cylinders with that offensive line. Now, it takes a little bit more pressure off DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Treylon Burks. All have to wait and see what that looks like when it comes down to the Tennessee Titans with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. So, yes, hard to project for these guys. And upside is unknown.
Kamara feels so close to falling off an edge completely. I don't mean this disrespectfully because in redraft leagues, I'll probably still be in if nothing has changed. But he is thriving off of check down targets and targets in general. Like that is the only thing keeping him afloat in fantasy.
And I think that's enough for...
It is enough, but I just don't know how long it's enough for.
Yeah, and last year averaged 17.9 fantasy points per game. In a points per game basis, he was the RB3. That's enough.
No, he was great. But again, he was not a good football player last year.
Sure.
I'm sorry, he wasn't.
Sure.
He just wasn't, and I think at some point that's going to catch up to you.
Yeah, I can definitely see that thought process. All right, we got two more tiers. Solid Vets is next. Take us through it.
Yeah, this is the biggest tier up until now at this point. Brian Robinson. We'll have to talk about some of these names. I'll just list them off. Brian Robinson, Ramondre Stevenson, James Conner, Aaron Jones, the Pittsburgh Steelers running backs, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb. Are we forgetting Nick Chubb might be the starter on this team? I know he had a terrible injury, but could Nick Chubb be a huge value right now? So this is just a huge list of good vets that probably have good roles, but there is certainly huge flashing red lights on what we do moving forward.
Okay, let's start off at the top here. Brian Robinson. I just feel a lot more confident with Brian Robinson now that they have Austin Eckler personally, because that just solidifies what his role is going to be. The goal line guy, maybe even the pass catching guy over Austin Eckler at points and times. Can Austin Eckler stay healthy? And he clearly wasn't the same guy last year. I feel more confident in Brian Robinson as a running back and as a talent at this point in time in their career versus Austin Eckler. And I would agree, he is a solid vet. Now, do I take him over some of these other guys like the Tony Pollards, Alvin Kamara's, Kendre Miller? Probably not. But I think there's have been a little bit more disrespect in the community on Brian Robinson more than like saying, okay, because you have to think about it. New offensive coordinator, new head coach, new quarterback is coming in. Brian Robinson, I think they're going to be leaning on him a lot more than what we think coming into this year.
I might disagree slightly, and I could see that as a range of outcomes. But to me, I don't think we realize how much he actually was, how much of his fantasy points came through the air last year.
Yep.
He almost had 400 receiving yards, and he had 4 receiving touchdowns, which he had 5 rushing touchdowns. He had 4 receiving touchdowns. So almost half of his touchdowns came through the air. And I just don't think you sign an Austin Eckler if you feel like that's the way you want to use a Brian Robinson. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I just don't feel like that makes any sense for them to do that. But it's hard to say this is what happened last year, so let's project for next year. Because again, whole new coaching staff, an entire new offensive coordinator, head coach, a whole new group of people being brought in, probably a rookie quarterback. So in general, it's tough to trust an offense with a rookie quarterback anyway. But also the signing of Austin Eckler, which we'll talk about in a second, to me is worrisome because what if Brian Robinson now becomes AJ Dillon? And no disrespect to AJ Dillon or Brian Robinson, but it's like if that's not your role, which I guess we're just projecting it differently. I just don't know how much to trust you.
Yeah, and I see that, and I think the reason why I'm more leaning on Brian Robinson is because it's clear that he showed that he can do both. Last year, I know as a new head coach, new regime, I agree. It's hard to project when a new offense, with a whole new regime coming in. I think my biggest difference here is that Austin Eckler does not look the same. And we saw that last year in a big way when, I mean, one of the things that we were, he's older, right? Like I forgot who he was playing. I think it was the Green Bay Packers. Massive hole in the left side. And he runs and he looks slow. He's slow. And he does. And he doesn't take away that he doesn't take the fact that he can catch 70 balls in the air still, right? But I think he might be a reliever guy and just a veteran presence in that backfield now. And that's how I'm I guess that's how I'm projecting it at the moment. But yeah, I agree. Like he can still take away.
Let me counter that for a sec because I definitely hear you. That is within the range of outcomes. But is there a guy who is a bigger competitor and a bigger I'm going to prove everything wrong than Austin Eckler? He's an undrafted free agent. He is the definition of an outlier. He knows he didn't perform well last year. I mean, he is in the fantasy space. He has heard it all. I think he's going to be super determined to get back to being an important player. But also, keep in mind, his role is now different. He's not asked to touch the ball 20 times a game anymore. So if they're bringing him on, we know he's not good as a rusher right now. So it makes sense. The only reason for them to bring on, in my opinion, is, hey, we're going to give you this role. Dominate this role. We don't need you to handle the rock 13 to 20 times a game anymore. We just need you to be this guy for us. Brian can rush it for 15 times a game. So that's the way I'm viewing it. I totally hear you, but I also don't think Eckler's signing to this is a competitive dude. He's not signing to your team if you're like, you can spell. And also, this team was never able to trust Antonio Gibson to not fumble the ball. Yeah. So now they got someone I think who can play that role with confidence. But different stage, different era. I don't know. It is just projection right now. Yeah. I could be wrong. You could be right. You could be wrong. I could be right.
Ramondre Stevenson getting opportunities taken away from him with Antonio Gibson is going to feel like one of the biggest upsetting things about Ramondre Stevenson is that Antonio Gibson comes in and most likely going to be taking the opportunity away in the air specifically. Yeah. I think Ramondre Stevenson now potentially becomes a 1-2 punch, but at the same time, Bill Belichick is no longer their new head coaching regime, so that's also going to change as well. But at the same time, this new head coaching regime brings in Antonio Gibson, which is very scary.
It's their decision.
And that's their decision. Ramondre is somebody that they acquired here. So that's going to be a very interesting thought process. Anyone else specifically you want to talk about here? I think maybe
I'll just say James Conner and Aaron Jones, I kind of view it similarly. They'll be the number one guy in a decent offense, but it's a very short timeline. 1 year's, I think, left on both their deals. Warren and Najee, I just don't know how much I want to be in on an Arthur Smith offense.
Right.
I don't know what to say. Joe Mixon, I am not convinced that this is it. I think they'll add more running backs to the draft, so maybe this is a little bit of projection. And Nick Chubb could be the most valuable player in this entire tier. I mean, why not? Why can't he get healthy and be the number one in Cleveland? They haven't cut him yet. I feel like they would have.
Well, he got injured week 2, right, Nick Chubb?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so plenty of time. I think essentially a whole season he had off, and new off season. So that is definitely an interesting thought process when it comes down to Nick Chubb. Let's see if he has the same juice that he had back in the day. All right, last tier for us here. You have a running back.
Yeah. Hey, you can't complain. At least you have a running back on your team. Let's talk. I mean, Devin Singletary. What an interesting turn of events in New York. Devin Singletary returns to his old OC in Brian Daboll, now his head coach. He comes to New York and he signs a 3-year, $16 million deal. If this is your running back room entering the season, I will put Devin Singletary higher on this list. Mm-hmm. That tells me you're committing to him and that contract was legit. But
I think so. I mean, it's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. But I think it tells me more like this is, we need someone. We need someone. We can't let go of Saquon and have no one and head into the NFL draft just hoping to grab a guy.
Yeah.
This gives us the opportunity to go in the NFL draft, not reach on a back, but there's plenty that we like potentially, and we'll add another guy to that backfield. I could be wrong, but to be fair, this is the same offensive coordinator in Buffalo that had Devin Singletary and never made him the guy. I mean, Zach Moss became a thing. They split touches. There was like a couple games where it was like, wow, Devin Singletary's taken over. And it was like, no, but he's not the guy. Like we've got plenty of guys we're going to get into the rotation. So tough call to make. I would probably put like the 207 and the 212 in this range in super flex values. This is where Eckler comes off the board. Raheem Mostert, Zach Moss, Chuba Hubbard, Zach Charbonnet, Zamir White, Chase Brown downtown, and Rashawn Johnson. That is like just you got a guy. This guy could score points for you maybe. Raheem Mostert could be higher, but he's almost 70 years old. It's a tough tier.
Yeah, and I think just to preface this tier, because it looks like this tier, it's all dependent on the NFL draft, it feels like, right? Zamir White. I think a lot of people say, well, Zamir White is going to be disrespected. Why, Chase Brown disrespected. It's because anything can happen in the NFL draft. If you're telling me that you don't believe that the Las Vegas Raiders are a team to get a running back in the draft, you're wrong. I think they are. Zamir White, has been great. Zeus, they used to call him, but there's somebody that they can definitely bring. Same thing with Devin Singletary. Zach Moss, I know he goes to Cincinnati Bengals with Chase Brown. That's going to be an interesting backfield as well. But
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What do you currently project that? If this is the backfield going into the year, who would you want? Zach Moss or Chase Brown? And I know we like Chase Brown.
I think I would want Zach Moss.
I think so too.
It's because he plays if I'm projecting it the right way, but at the same time, new offensive coordinator. I'm not necessarily sure how that's going to go, but if we're just projecting based off what happened last year and you put Zach Moss into that Joe Mixon role,
makes more sense.
You want Joe, it makes more sense, and you want Zach Moss, but anything can happen. I think Chase Brown, in my personal opinion, is a little bit more explosive, obviously, than Zach Moss. Yes. He can catch the ball. I think he knows how to handle the workload. We've seen that from his time at college. So, look, Zach Moss maybe is the veteran, and then maybe Chase Brown is going to be the guy next year. But I think
at
we
minimum,
would know more.
It wouldn't surprise me either way.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either way. I would agree. But at this moment, I would have to say Zach Moss is the guy you want, with Chase Brown being the spell guy. Maybe he's the guy that gets all the opportunity in the air.
And Chuba Hubbard maybe does feel a little disrespected. If the Panthers truly go through this cycle and they don't add it back, and Chuba is the guy, I will probably have to put him in a much higher regard. I just am not convinced exactly that is 100% happening yet. So
I mean, Miles Sanders technically still on contract. They do have an out next year at the end of 2024. $2.9 million dead cap. If they do cut him this year, is $8 million. I mean, they just traded for a second-round pick, traded away Brian Burns to the Giants. I think that's a 1-2 punch wide receiver. Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, I think, are going to have an opportunity coming into
probably
this
is
year.
Safe, yeah.
One more. Yeah, I would agree.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about? I think that's it, no?
Yeah, that's about it. I guess maybe we missed something. No, everyone's good. Everyone's good.
Gus Edwards, I didn't add. I just don't believe he's going to be the only dude there. Jerome Ford, I like. I'm just not convinced. And Ty Chandler, Aaron Jones is there. Why are we talking about him now? He couldn't emerge with Alexander Madison. Why would he do it with Aaron Jones? So
Exactly.
do us a favor, guys. Hit the like button. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you soon. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.